So we're going to be starting off something a bit different in DevTips Daily. We're going to do a little mini-series on creating a full project end-to-end. So this will be going from some sort of design phase, although it might not be a typical design phase, and then we're going to start architecting both a back-end and a front-end, and we're going to deploy this to a server. And then ultimately we'll have a domain name with the project live, so we'll have gone from this design phase all the way to the deployed project when it's completed. So as this is DevTips Daily, we're going to try and focus on one little thing each day, so hopefully you'll gain a little bit of knowledge about this process as we progress through this series, and it may change as we go, as we add some more features or as things with our design actually update. So I thought we'd just kick off this first dev tip by going through a sort of design process in terms of what we're actually going to be building, and I came up with an idea, and all projects start with an idea obviously. So the idea I came up with was to kind of create a sort of URL shortener, but there's a bit of a twist. We'll be redirecting the users to one specific place, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second, but let's put down some ideas of how this might look. So the first thing we're going to want is the user's going to be able to have a page that they can interact with. So for the user, we're going to need to provide them with some sort of a web page. So this will be a web interface. So we're not really sure how that will look at the moment, but we know that that's how the user is going to interact with the app. So the user interacts with the web interface, and essentially what they will get out of that as a sort of output is a URL that they can use. So this will be like a redirect URL. And we're not sure how that will look at the moment exactly. It'll be depending on the domain name that we get, but let's say it's something like this. So redirect.com / and then there'll be some random characters, as you've seen probably in other URL shortening programs. So this is the thing that the user is going to get out of it. So how are we going to generate that URL? So we'll need some kind of back-end interface for that. So let's just pop that down here. So there'll be some kind of API or back-end service to generate the URL. And then if we sort of add this all up together with some arrows to show the user flow, so the user obviously interacts with web interface. That web interface then calls out to our back-end service. Oops, let's see if we can get the arrow there. And then the back-end service is what is going to generate the redirect URL for us. So we'll just stick that up here. And of course, that redirect URL will be provided back to the user as well. And will be shown on the web interface so they can copy and paste it and use it elsewhere. So normally with a URL shortener, the user would put in a long URL and we'd generate this short URL and give it back to them. And then they can view various stats about how the URL is being used. But we're going to do something slightly different, as mentioned, as a twist. We're not actually going to allow the user to put in a long URL. We're just going to generate a URL for them, which actually redirects them to a Rick Astley videos. So we're basically just going to generate these redirect URLs that will redirect to a YouTube video, for example, and the user will then be able to use them to rickroll all of their colleagues. So the other side of this is the redirect URL as well. So we're generating these URLs from the back-end service, but we also want another user to actually type that redirect into their browser or copy it in, or however they put it in there. So we've got another user here. So this is the user that's been provided with the redirect URL. So just move him over here. And what will happen with this user is they will actually go and use the redirect URL, and that will actually then call to our backend service and will redirect them to the Rick Astley video. So let's just see if we can move this over here. I'll get the arrows to line up a bit better. There we go, that's pretty good. So what this API or backend service will do then is just redirect the user to another web page, which will be the YouTube video, for example. So let's just put that over here. And then when we receive a request for one of these redirect URLs, it will just send us off to that YouTube page. So hopefully you can see all of that on one page there. So we've got the two user cases. So we've got the user that's going to be generating the redirects and also the user that's going to be consuming them as well. So in addition to this, the plan is to also put in some stats for the redirect URL. So the user that actually creates the redirect URL in the first place will have an additional ability to actually see any stats. So when you can tell when actually someone's clicked on that link and they've actually been followed the video off to YouTube. And we'll probably do that just by putting in an extra path parameter onto the end of the redirect URL. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an idea of what we're going to be doing in the project, and also a bit of the structure of how it's going to be put together. In the next tutorial, what we're going to do is look at creating something called user stories for all of the use cases for the users that are going to be involved in the project. But that's it for this tutorial. Make sure you stay tuned for more web dev tips.